sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
This is Rabbi Sherman and Rabbi on the Sidelines, where we speak about the intersection of sports and faith. This morning we are joined by Jason Horowitz of Westwood One and CBS Sports, a longtime friend from back in the days of Syracuse University, joining us from the East Coast. Jason Horowitz. Jason, it's so good to not just hear you, but see your face. How you doing?
Good, Rabbi. How are you? Do I call you? Okay, so here's the question. You weren't Rabbi when we met. You were like soon-to-be Rabbi, college kid, tall, skinny man that I just knew as Erez. Do I call you Rabbi now? Do I call you Rabbi Sherman? Do I just call you Erez? Where do I go with?
I think you call me coach on this. Coach in the synagogue or Rabbi on the Sidelines. Actually, let me start with that story for everybody. I was a rabbinical student doing my high holy days in Syracuse, New York, where I'm from, in Syracuse University Hillel. And we took a little break in the high holy day action, and I basically didn't ask the rabbi anything about Syracuse sports. And there was a guy in there that asked me anything. I think you asked me a question about James Theus. And you were like, how do you know this stuff? And then you realize that, I was born and bred a townie of Syracuse, New York.
Yes, at which I got a chance to visit with your family at the house. And we had many a winter break time together. And my college roommate, Lauren Canaster, was the president of Hillel at Syracuse University at the time. So it was very much an enjoyable. I don't remember this at all, by the way. You brought that up to me a few weeks ago about the stories and this and that. Like, I remember being at your house. I do not remember much of the other stuff at all. Your memory is much better than mine.
Yes, I don't remember the sermon I gave, but I remember the questions you asked for sure. For sure. Well, it is wonderful to have you on Rabbi on the Sidelines. I get to do a little bit of what you do on a daily basis, but really, as we spoke a couple of weeks ago, taking it from a different angle, faith and sports, especially in today's, if you wish, crazy world where we're dealing with anti-Semitism and Israel, and sports seems to be an escape sometimes. We had Dan Schulman on the show. We had Seth Greenberg. Seth Greenberg mentioned an anti-Semitic incident when he, as a coach of Long Beach State, played against New Mexico. Dan Schulman mentioned during the Gulf War how he basically went home in the middle of a hockey game and said, in this moment, I need to be a Jew. I need to stand with my faith. Do faith and sports intersect in the world that you see each and every day?
Oh, well, yes, every day. I don't know in terms of every day, but the answer is absolutely yes. It has always been yes. And just as you visualize the aspect of what I think we think of as religion, you see it all the time. Before taking a knee for the national anthem became a political conversation, taking a knee was never anything looked frowned upon, right? Taking a knee was after you score a touchdown and you drop to a knee and you pray, or players on both teams will meet at midfield or after a game, and they will pray together, whether it was because of an end of a game or an injury or anything. Like, taking a knee was never a thing that was a political conversation, or it was anything, frankly, for that matter, even divisive. It was just generally thought of as something that had to do with faith. And so, yeah, I think faith and sports always interact. I think there's, just like any other walks of life, people come from different backgrounds. People come from different faiths. And even more now than ever before, all of that in a locker room is acceptable. It's interesting because particularly during the pandemic, sports almost became something to latch onto. Whereas if you were pro continuing sports or pro not displaying how you feel about activism, that you were on one side of a political aisle, or if you were, hey, we should be a little bit more cautious where sports fits in, and oh, by the way, yes, it's okay to talk about what you believe in and stand up for, like the NBA and WNBA, then you were on the other political side. So, like, sports during the pandemic has become a little bit more of a split. But to your original point, sports has always been the unifying factor. Sports has always been the thing that's been able to bring people back together. It's like, hey, this is what we're watching. I might like my team, you might like your team, but it's just one thing. I'd like to think that will become the story again. I don't know how long. I don't know if it, in fact, is the case right now. But in general, I'd like to think that is going to be the aspect. And it might very well be, a sporting event comes September, where the majority of the country is vaccinated, people feel comfortable watching 90,000 people in a football stadium. They feel comfortable being there, because that's not the case now. Like when the Texas Rangers on opening day had a full stadium, there's no way we were all like, yeah, that's the best thing to do. Let's go. But I think hopefully by we get to September and whatever football stadium that is, when you're watching it and you're like, that's full, it's the right thing to do, we're good, then maybe that's the moment where it's the unifying thing again. Yeah,
I mean, in June, we're looking at, full stadiums possibly for not even outside, but the NBA playoffs as well.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. So let's take a different aspect in faith right here, a story that most people don't know about you, but I heard on a podcast, so in the public knowledge, that a little faith led you to do what you're doing today in your history of bar mitzvahs. So what was that high school job that you had? Because as you just told me off air, that you love people. So you're a people person.
Yeah.
You love not just speaking with them, but telling their stories. So what did you do in high school that led to what you're doing today?
So 3 parts to this. One, my demographic is more the Price is Right crowd. I really fit in with the 60 and older. Come on down. You're the next contestant on the Price.
Have you been to the show?
I have never been to the show.
Oh my gosh, I've been 3 times. Get out here. We gotta go.
Is it amazing? Do you still have to get up at like 5 a.m. and get in line? Well, right now, you guys maybe not the case, but like before pandemic, did you still have to get up at 5 a.m. and get in line and get a number?
Let's just say I was able to get in the door.
You have a connection. Of course you do. You have a connection to everything. So I was a DJ on our local radio station. And I had done like a 6th grade dance in a barn for one of the local schools. And so I had done that, and somebody approached me like, hey, do you do this on a regular basis? And I'm like, no, this is just for our high school radio station, WBFH, the Biff. And I think I got like $25 to do it, right? I got like $25, which, is whatever, 16, great. They're like, well, hey, you should come do this with us. And I'm like, okay. And the company was called Joe Cornell Entertainment. And Joe Cornell was what I had taken when I was in 6th grade, where you took the dance classes where you're the boy and you're with the girl and you learn the box step and, you're a full arm's length away as you're holding each other's shoulders, not trying to step on each other's foot or anything along those lines. And so I had been familiar with Joe Cornell Entertainment, and they had done a bar and bat mitzvahs when I was in the 7th and 8th grade, but I never thought about working for them. And so I went to work for them, and unlike a lot of the companies in the area, they, where the DJs were behind the table, and they had the MC and the dancers, and it was a really big production. Joe Cornell gave you different options of packages, so you could just get an MC and the DJ, in which case it was me as a dancer with the MC, like pumping up people, or you could get the package that included the dancers, and I didn't have to do as much, but you're still in front of the table. So I was very much involved in the Cotton Eye Joe and the line dance and the hustle, and I was very much involved in all of that. And it was an awesome high school job, not only because like you had the piece of paper that allowed you to be out past 1 a.m. for whatever the Michigan laws were, where you couldn't be driving at 16 beyond midnight, but also like I was hanging out with college kids who were like, hey, you want to come up to Michigan State and hang out? I'm like, yeah, sure. My brother didn't invite me this weekend. I'm all in. So it was an awesome high school job. And it's, like you're enjoying you are part of moments when people are having hopefully a wonderful, if it's spiritual, great. If it's second, whatever it is, just a wonderful moment for their family. You get to be part of it. And that was a nice part of it too.
And so how does that intersect with what you do right now? I think you just hit it right on the head right there, that you are part of something that people are experiencing joy with, right? Yeah. And so when I'm watching the NCAA tournament or listening in my car to you, right? What are you thinking on the air that says, I'm going to bring these people joy, whether they're going to win or lose?
So my perspective on all of that has changed. So I grew up 100%, everything about my life, kind of like how you felt, other than the other side of being a rabbi. It was all sports. It's all I talked about. It's all I wanted to do. It's all I did. Almost to the point of like, so when I first went to a Michigan game with my uncle, who's the one who got me, helped me fall in love with sports. The next year when I came back for Michigan, Minnesota, I heard from the guy behind, oh, you brought that kid back. And my uncle was like, yeah. And I'm like tugging on his arm. I'm 9 years old. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, oh, you're the kid that asked all the questions last year.
Nice.
What does that mean?
Nice.
What does this do? But like, I used to think it was so serious, and you had to like everything had to be delivered correctly, and if you said something wrong, it's a lot more go with the flow, right? And I know you were referencing the NCAA tournament, and people live and die with the tournament, and like you live in Los Angeles, UCLA in the Final Four, amazing run, right? Amazing run, and then they get their hearts broken on a forever memorable moment, right? That will go down in history as one of the greatest moments in NCAA tournament history. And so like you want to meet that moment, but at the same time, like we're delivering it to you like a fan. The whole aspect doesn't have to be of this authoritative aspect on sports about how it's, like Seth Greenberg is very much in that. But my role is more along the lines of let's live it together.
Nice.
We are enjoying that together. We are breaking it down. We're talking about it. We have access that you don't. But we're breaking it down together, and that's a really, really nice thing.
So we're going to go back to, I believe, 2005, because you just said your opinion changed. That your opinion changed and how you broadcast sports. So we're going to look at what you thought going out of college in 2005, and then we'll chat about that.
Class.
Okay.
Day Hall, room 317, I think is what it was. No, you know what? Honestly, when I came to Syracuse, I wanted to be a play-by-play guy, and that's exactly what I try to do. That's why I worked at WAER and some of the other internships that I had during the summer. It's kind of veered off of that since I got out of Syracuse. I'd still like to call some games over the course of however long I'm in the business, but that was what I wanted to do. But there's something exciting about live TV, whether you're out doing a game or you're in a studio. The rush of, all right, you're on in 3, 2, 1, and I think anyone who's ever done anything in live TV, whether it's a producer, a director, or behind the scenes, or even just a production assistant, they get that same rush and adrenaline of, all right, you go and don't stop because nobody else is stopping.
So I'm going to actually ask you something.
I look the same. Nothing changed. Not at all.
Yeah, that's why they hide you behind the microphone.
Can you see? Do these look like old man lines here? They feel like old man lines.
Exactly. I'm gonna turn the ring light off behind the computer here as well. Let's talk about the pandemic and broadcasting sports, like you said, not traveling, but really dealing with that live audience. I had the same experience just 3 weeks ago when we opened our doors again for the synagogue. That my wife and I, was both the rabbi with me, we were doing Zoom Shabbats, and all of a sudden somebody said back to us Shabbat Shalom, and we literally just wept in tears because we had that experience. So take us through the live moments. You're after the UCLA game, you're in a studio in your house or whatever, talking with Doug Gottlieb, but in the moment, what is that like, and how does that feed on what you bring to the audience?
So that can be in a lot of different ways. So this past Wednesday and Thursday was my first game in person. I did the Big East men's lacrosse national semifinals, or the Big East men's lacrosse semifinals, and I was in Providence to do it.
Was that the Bryant game?
No. That was Georgetown. Like, this is last week. Georgetown played Villanova, and Denver played Providence, and the winner of the Big East tournament gets the automatic bid, just like every other college.
Got it.
So I had done that, but I had not been in a venue since February 29th, 2020. I have traveled a couple of times over the last year and a half. I traveled out to Los Angeles. That's where we did our studios for the NCAA tournament. And then I was in Cleveland to do the NFL draft. But the NFL draft still on radio, you're there, but it's still a little bit different. And we didn't have the audience in front of us. We were put aside. And so it's still, we were together, but it could have been a studio. But for this, it felt different because you watch the players warming up. You're seeing their excitement. You're walking past them to get to the booth. You have people around you, all of those things. It wasn't a full stadium or anything like that. It wasn't what you become accustomed to when you're doing all this. But one of the things that you played that clip about saying I wanted to go to Syracuse to be a play-by-play guy, and if there's the rush to the studio. All that's totally true. When the NCAA tournament music comes on, even though I'm by myself or with Doug in a studio or whatever that is, it's still that here's Jason Horowitz, and you get excited, and that's awesome. But one of the reasons the last 7 years that I've gone back to calling games and will continue to do that when you are sitting in a stadium, when you are sitting in a basketball arena and it has people in it, they're there because they care. But also they're there because it's something to do. And the last game I did before the pandemic, it wasn't, I know you had Dan Schulman on, it wasn't Duke, North Carolina. It wasn't Michigan State. It wasn't anything like that. It was Bradley Loyola of Chicago and the winner won the Missouri Valley Conference regular season. And then the Missouri Valley tournament was going to be the next week. There were 11,000 people in the Peoria Event Center or whatever they're.
Everybody cared.
Everybody there because it's a small town, right? It used to be a bigger town. It's a small town with a school like Bradley in it that is the center of it with history, but that people generally don't talk about. But to them, it matters. And so one of the things that I've started doing when we're at arenas, and obviously it's been a couple of years since I've done it, in the middle of a game, I tried, and I put on a little Post-it note just to remind myself to do it. At some point, or sometimes 2 points, I will take my headset off in the middle of a game while we're in a call, when I know I have a few seconds, just to hear. Because if you hear the crowd noise piped into your headset, like that's normal. You get that, and you can get different volumes and all that stuff. That part's normal. But it feels different when you actually take it off like you are sitting in the stands. And so like the first time I ever did it is at Rutgers, actually. Because at Rutgers, they're
crazy stadium,
the rack, right? Basketball.
Yes,
and now that they're good, like you haven't been out here since they've been good. Now that they're good, that place has got 10,000 every time, and it's like a what is it? A trapezoid?
Yeah,
trapezoid, right? So the sound is just straight up, right? Everybody, but the broadcast position isn't on the floor for basketball.
Right.
It's
like
one
right in there.
Yeah, you are right in there to the point where a woman once told me for a women's basketball game, she turned around, she said, "Can you quiet it down, please?"
Yeah. Last time I was there was when Carmelo Anthony played for Syracuse and they lost. That was one of their 4 losses of the year, and I never went back. So.
Yeah. What was that? Quincy Doobie? Was it Quincy Doobie?
Yeah, like a 3 off the backboard. It was crazy.
But like that's something really cool. Like that's what we all live for, right? You all live the best environment that I have been in to call a football game. I've been in a lot of great Super Bowls, national championship games, but to actually do the play-by-play. I've done Michigan, Wisconsin in the Big House, which was a long lifetime thrill as growing up in Michigan. It was the year after my mom passed away, and I was asked to call the Michigan-Wisconsin game for Westwood One. And I remember I stayed at my dad's house, and I remember driving to Ann Arbor that morning, just thinking about the fact of like, I've made this drive dozens of times, but now I'm making this drive as this dream moment for a career. And then the other was at Wisconsin. Like when they talk about jump around at Camp Randall Stadium and you feel 90,000 people shaking you, it's totally true. And Wisconsin, Iowa for the Big Ten West Division a couple of years ago was unbelievable.
So you talked about dream and that being your dream, but let's talk about dream job and how that was a break in your career as a college student. And I think that also related a little bit to the bar mitzvah piece and your dancing and acting.
So it does actually. So Dream Job. So the auditions for Dream Job, and for people who don't know, Dream Job was kind of like American Idol for Sports Center. It was basically the same thing. They held auditions in different cities across the country, and from those, let's call it 10 cities, they whittled it down to a semifinal in New York City, where you had to audition again for, at the time, the guy who was the head of their talent department, Al Jaffe, among others. And I didn't know any better. I was like a junior in college going into my senior year. And so I drove down to Washington, D.C. It was on my birthday, actually. I auditioned there, and they put 10 of us around a cocktail table. And they just went around all right, give us your best call, right? And so I pretended I was Ernie Harwell, who was the Detroit Tigers play-by-play guy growing up, and that's all I ever wanted to be. And I gave a home run call that he did. But I did it how I always do things, loud and with energy.
Yes.
That's all they were looking for, because they were making a TV show. They just wanted someone to have energy and be loud. If they found someone who could actually be on TV or radio, great. But they just wanted someone who would have some energy, right? Which I didn't know that at the time. So I did that in D.C. I drive back up to Syracuse. I turned 21 that day. And I get the call that hey, you made the next phase of the audition. So I went down to New York City. And they said that you had to prepare something to, I don't remember if it was to wow the judges or to impress the judges or whatever. I had no idea what I was going to do. So I went back to my old days as a DJ at bar and bat mitzvahs, and my my beginning of my audition, before they asked me about anything sportscaster wise or to do anything like that or any interview skills, I brought a boombox with me that I carried through the streets of New York. This is summer of 2004, and I played The Hustle.
Yeah.
And tried to get Al Jaffe and other ESPN employees to get up and do a line dance with me. and that was the beginning of my audition for ESPN's Dream Job.
So funny because, actually, got to give credit to my mom, who was in classes with my brother. And when you came for Shabbat dinner, my mom was, that's the guy that did The Hustle and the Dream Job. So a shout out to my mom for connecting us.
I still love Stevie Wonder to this day, by the way. My eyes don't cry no more.
So you have an energy about you that, like you said, it works, but you also obviously have the knowledge of the sports and the talent as well. But you also tell stories that are not on the court, which I love. You talked about taking the headphones off and listening to the crowd. But you also told the beautiful story, I believe, was Morehouse State and the cheerleaders. How do you find those off-the-court stories and say, this is what the people want to hear at home? So tell us about those cheerleaders.
So it was Morehead State, and Morehead State is about an hour away from Lexington in Kentucky. And, it's again, these are small schools. So the blessing and the curse, right? We all get into this and that we want to be doing the national championship game. We want to be doing the Super Bowl. We want to be doing whatever big college, big game.
And
whatever.
You have, by the way, Jason Horowitz, Westwood One, has been on those fields and courts.
I am blessed in that aspect of it. I love the fact that I've been the host of the NCAA tournament. This was my, I guess the pandemic cut one off. So this was my 7th year as the host of the tournament. I've done every Final Four in some capacity since 2007, and I've done 4 Super Bowls and all those things.
And I've watched them. It's amazing.
but if you just kind of keep your eyes open and your ears open, you find stuff that you have no idea existed. Morehead State is in the Ohio Valley Conference, and so is Tennessee Martin. And earlier that year, we were at UT Martin, which is actually where Pat Summitt began. She played at UT Martin before she became the former, obviously she is passed now, but before the Hall of Famer at Tennessee that really got women's basketball going. Tennessee Martin had just won a national rodeo championship. And I didn't know that except for the fact that every college campus that I go to, I visit their bookstore. And when I was in their bookstore, I saw a shirt that you could buy that was UT Martin rodeo. So I asked our producer, hey, can we get anybody to shoot this X, Y, and Z? And it was last minute, so it was hard. But what we found out was that my analyst, Mark Jackson, not of the St. John's and Knicks fame, but Mark Jackson of Temple fame, and played a long time in the NBA, right? 6'10", 6'11" guy, rode horses. And so Mark Jackson was a roper. And so we put pictures of Mark Jackson roping, and we tied it all into UT Martin's rodeo, and it was awesome. Morehead State, I had talked to their SID, sports information director, and at smaller schools, they're, at big schools like Syracuse and Kentucky, like their basketball person is just basketball. Right. Their football person is just football. At smaller schools, they're responsible for a lot of different things. And their basketball person told me, hey, we just won our 43rd, I think it was, cheerleading national championship. And it comes in different forms. There's individual, there's dance, there's pyramid, there's whatever, but they just won. So there was nobody there. Kentucky basketball was playing a game at noon Eastern, the same time that we were doing our game, Morehead State. And I don't even remember who Morehead State was playing. But the cheerleaders were there. And so at halftime, we had set it up that I was going to go up in the pyramid with Morehead State. And we filmed it and we shot it. And I was terrified. Have you ever been on the top of a pyramid?
I have not. The closest I've been is to the top of an arc.
It is absolutely horrifying. But that's the type of stuff. And the radio show that I've been doing for the last few years with Sirius XM, it allows for this type of stuff too. One of the other things, do you know that there's collegiate meat judging, and it's a competition? Do you know this?
There's the kosher deli one, and then there's not.
Yeah. No, it's not about the kosher cut. But just like when you get a grade of beef, when you get a grade of a certain type of sirloin or a chuck or whatever it is, someone had to make sure that was done properly, and that's like a good cut. So all around the country, there are universities that specialize in meat science. Wow. And we were having a conversation dead in the summer. It's college radio. It's May or June. We weren't really breaking down the upcoming season yet. And we were talking about all these random sports that colleges host. And we came across collegiate meat judging. And Oklahoma State was the defending national champions. And we called their coach later that day, and we booked her for a spot on the next day's show. And like, she and I have now developed a relationship. Her name is Gretchen Mayfie. She went to Texas Tech. Texas Tech is also great at meat judging, so there's a rivalry, but she's the coach at Oklahoma State. And like a year later, she brought Oklahoma State, because they were doing a competition in Pennsylvania. She brought them up to New York, and they were in the studio with me, the team, to do a spot. And like that blew my mind, because like Ohio State's good at meat judging, Colorado State, Texas Tech, whatever. And like those are the things you find out if you just kind of just enjoy it, right?
I love the enjoyment. It seems like it's not work for you. It's the finding the story that, as you said in the beginning, actually brings joy and a sense, I don't want to just say entertainment, but a sense of connection with people. Like you said, you brought them in the studio, but you actually create this relationship with the people.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my favorite things about you as well over the years.
You know, one of the things, and like this is what you're doing right now, like you're the interviewer today, and this is great. But like, okay, when you bring someone on for a radio show that's not a podcast, so you are a little bit constricted by commercial breaks, or in our case with Westwood One, because of pregame show lengths, our interviews air 4 minutes, but the coach and I will talk for 10 or 12. You're asking about the upcoming game, you're asking about the storyline, and like all that stuff, but they're asked that stuff 6 times a week,
right?
And I'm more interested about, particularly in the last year with the pandemic, what are you doing at home? Oh, you built a pool? Great. What are your favorite strokes? Oh, you don't actually know how to swim? Well, let's talk about that. Like that type of stuff. Like that, I find that stuff far more enjoyable than everything else.
But how do you dig that out, right? Because you're right. A lot of people are saying, Coach Boeheim, is the zone defense going to stay even though the press isn't working? Or, right. How do you dig that out of people? Is it the research? Is it just like, how do you allow people to express themselves in a way that they usually wouldn't in any other way?
So I'm not very intimidating. That's A. like I'm generally pretty like this, right? Even when we bring on guests, you bring them into the conversation that you're having, right? If it's something about, yesterday we were having a conversation about butt dials on our show. And like, just because,
what show is this? So everybody knows.
So on Sirius XM, I host College Sports Today, which is 1 to 4 Eastern on ESPNU channel 84. But also I do work on the Big Ten channel and the ACC channel, which is 371 for ACC and 372 for Big Ten on Sirius XM. But like, we were having a conversation about butt dials because someone texted me, they called me, and I said, hey, I can't talk right now. They're like, oh, I didn't mean to. It was a butt dial. And it was during the show, so I just brought up this idea. Like, I really believe that 75% of people who tell you they butt dialed actually meant to call you, but they don't want the embarrassment of you be like, I can't answer right now.
Interesting.
And so like that became like 4 or 5 minutes of just general whatever. And we had an interview scheduled, and he came on, and he's listening to this as like we was waiting for 45 seconds. So then we got his take on it. So like it just, some people are into it. Some people only want to get in and get out, and they're just doing it because they have to. And you get that sense pretty quickly. Yeah. But if they're into it, then like those are the things that are, they humanize coaches.
It's not just coaches though. I think it's also human beings. I mean, I had Coach Boeheim here for 45 minutes, and I didn't say a word because he was talking about his 2 hairs he owns on the horse in the in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
But like to talk to a hero of mine like Coach Boeheim, and to talk about the work that he's done in special needs that he doesn't publicize,
right,
that I've seen. Or to talk about Coach Phil Martelli, about coaching versus cancer and why he wants to crush cancer. To talk to Chelsea Hopkins, who played in WNBA, who's now in Israel, who today I reach out to her to say, how are you? Like those relationships, I call it beyond the ball, right? And I think what you're amazing at is bringing those human interest stories beyond the court. And that's why personally I love tuning into you and hearing not just your voice, but also the stories that you do bring to us.
The other stuff with that, is that that doesn't just have to be for obviously this medium or this line of work. I mean, that's just daily life, right? I'm coaching 2nd grade softball. My daughter's in 2nd grade, and I'm coaching second grade softball, and we have 14 kids, which, by the way, is way too many on a softball team in second grade where the ball never gets to the outfield, and you have to play all 14 kids at every single time the entire game. All right, so that's just a separate note. But, like, I have tried to take it. It's like, what do you like to do? Find out their interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a coach. I am definitely not a coach. I love having these kids have fun and all that stuff. I am not a coach in that regard. But, like, good coaches get the best out of their players because they care about their players and they find out what is the best that, obviously at a higher level makes their players better. But a player will play his or her best for a coach that they believe actually cares about them and has some kind of knowledge or interest about them or remembers the simplest things like names.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like a parent was shocked a couple weeks ago that I remembered another parent's name. But
Mm-hmm.
like that's the simplest thing we could do
Mm-hmm.
is names.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But like even that became politicized this year when Kamala Harris was running for vice president because people were like, oh, I'm just not going to, it's just a name. I can't. What do you mean it's just a name? The name is the thing that you hold most sacred. It is the thing that you should learn.
I love that moment actually right there. And you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that you're actually involved with your own faith community, specifically in membership welcoming.
Yeah.
And we talk about that all the time, that somebody can walk into a sacred space every single week for whether it's Sunday church service, Saturday Sabbath service, and nobody will know their name. And
right.
How does that name mean something, not just to them, but actually to the whole community as well?
We all have a need for belonging, right? My wife kids me all the time that I have FOMO, fear of missing out, which is totally true. I've always wanted to be one of the cool kids, and I never was.
You made it on Rabbi on the Sidelines, Jason Horowitz.
But like that. Today, I believe this is, if it's today or yesterday, but like Mental Health Awareness Day, right? And it may be a week. It might actually even be an entire month. But I think as we get older, you realize everybody's going through something. And sometimes we don't take the time to stop and realize that someone's actions towards you, conversations with you, you're like, oh, why are they feeling that way? Why are they saying that? What did I do to that? It's not about you. It's about what they're going through. And I think, we all have so much going on in our own lives. Obviously, this year has taken a toll on everybody in so many different ways. But we don't stop to think about what someone else is going through because we and this is normal. This is not a bad thing. It's just you internalize it based on how you see it, how you're feeling it, how you're experiencing it. But those moments when you can stop to just kind of like sit back for a second and realize something as simple as saying, "Hey, how are you?" is maybe something that actually changes someone's outlook on their respective day. That's an amazing thing. And it's a simple thing. It's like a really simple thing that could change someone's day. And you don't always, appreciate it. And I'm not saying I do it all the time.
No.
have to stop and remember to do it.
Yeah. I just saw yesterday somebody within our own community who's going through a lot of angst and challenges. And I watched somebody else say, how are you? What's going on with your family? And that person, like, the jaw almost dropped and started just expressing how they were feeling. And I wrote to the person who did that saying, I don't even realize if you understood how much of an impact you made on that person because you noticed them. You said you count. You're here.
Totally. And it's simple stuff too. Like people aren't obviously there's different levels to this. Some people do need much larger than others. But generally speaking, you can change someone's day by just saying hi and and noticing them or asking them a question and focusing it on them. And those are things I've learned a lot later in life. I'm not old, I'm 37, but like we're about to have our third kid and we're dealing with our own stuff. And, my mom passed away 5 years ago. And so like we deal with a lot of things along those lines. But a buddy of mine, his mom just passed away. And for the first couple of weeks, I was checking in on him every couple of days. Yesterday, I realized it had been a month and a half. Immediate, because it's as simple as a text message, right?
Yeah, that obviously in Shiva, in the Jewish tradition of the 7 days of mourning,
right?
I always say that the most important day is day 8.
Yep.
Nobody's in the house, right? What do you do? Who's sending that text messages? Who's saying like, are you okay? Right? Day 1 through 7 are never easy, right? But it's almost this false sense of community. But on day 8, when you're alone, what do you do? And actually, in Jewish tradition, on end of Shiva, you walk around the block saying, I'm going to enter the world.
Yep.
But the question is, how will the world sort of re-enter back into your life?
And I was fortunate in that regard. And again, my mom passed away at a fairly young age. And I know right around the same time, give or take a year, your brother passed away.
In 2017, yeah.
Yeah, and my mom was 2016. And, we had a couple of different spiritual things with us because my son was essentially conceived the day my mom died. And we were going through some more scientific measures and how it was. And we were living in New York City, and my mom and dad were in Michigan. And my brother had called. He had driven up from Chicago. He's like, this is the end. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it was 5 or 6 months from diagnosis to end. But we made the decision because of the process to get to that point. All right, we're gonna go with the retrieval. We're gonna do this way, and we'll see. Who knows if it works? Who knows if it doesn't? But it's been too much to get through for one day not to be there. And when it was all said and done, we had one egg that turned out to be fertilized, and it's the one that is my son. And if you believe in the whole idea that scientifically it takes 24 hours or whatever in that realm to happen, then essentially when my mom was dying, my son was born. To be perfectly honest, I have struggled.
Wow.
With that. I have struggled with that because they're obviously very different people, and he's 4 and all of that stuff. But there's also something special to that. Mm-hmm. To be honest, when people would bring that up afterwards, I would get angry about it because I didn't. That's a lot of pressure on different levels. But there's also a lot of beauty in that as well.
Absolutely, and memory is something that we do well as Jews. We do well as human beings, and it perpetuates not just our future, but also allows us to remember our past. I mean, the kippah that I wear right here is one that I have not taken off my head since 2017. It was given to me as a gift, really as a gift of blessing for the memory of my brother as well. And it's so fascinating because, we started with the fun, the ordinary, the mundane, but what's so important to people about sports. Like I said, I listened to every one of your broadcasts for Westwood One, Super Bowl, etc. You've been on those fields. You've interviewed the greats. What I highly admire about you is actually you don't change on air or off air because you are a human being that tells a story and that finds the important stories that also need to be told as well. Yeah. So back to the mundane just for one moment, because I am sitting down the street from Westwood, and not Westwood One, but Westwood and Pauley Pavilion. And I just want to play one last clip here when before this year, a little while back, but UCLA was in the Final Four, and this is what you said with Ben Howland.
Hey, how are you, folks? And welcome back to Destination San Antonio, presented by Coors Light. Jason Horowitz alongside head coach of Columbia, Joe Jones, CBS College Sports Network, Steve Lapis, and CBS Sports' Bill Raftery. 4 1 seeds in the Final Four for the first time all time. 2 of them are gone. One of those is UCLA. 3 straight trips to the Final Four. First time since Phi Slamma Jamma that a team has lost 3 consecutive years in the Final Four without winning a national championship. Are people going to remember this team 20 years from now? And if so, how are they going to remember them?
Well, I think
20 years from now, right? And now we're talking Mick Cronin back in the Final Four from the first 4 out. I had Joe Lunardi on the show talking about this as well. Talk about that moment, what you thought then.
That's
and then
13 years ago.
13 years ago.
By the way, someone go back in time and tell me it's not okay to wear that shirt.
Well, they were making fun. Rafter was making fun of your sunglasses after that. But 13 years ago, you said, is somebody going to remember this team 2 decades from now? We're a decade and a half, and we're back in the Final Four with lots of coaching changes with Mick Cronin on the sides. What's going on out here in Westwood, and what do you see for the future?
Well, you know what's interesting about that? I didn't obviously mean UCLA as a school or a brand. I meant that specific run, right? And that third one of those was Kevin Love. And before that, it was Aaron Aflalo and that group. It's funny. They obviously have been brought back up. Like, we talked about that a lot during their run. But, like, Aris, those Final Four teams were 1 and 2 seeds. Like those teams were along those lines, right? You know, they were the ones who were supposed to get to the Final Four. I know this UCLA team this year was really good, but like people complained, oh, they weren't an 11 seed. This run to the Final Four proved they weren't an 11 seed. Runs in the tournament don't dictate whether or not you were seeded correctly. They just show how you do over the course of a 2.5 week span. And in this year's case, in one location, dealing with COVID tests and all the other stuff. And, you know, in their case, like UCLA lost one of its best players. They had pros, and I'm blanking on what his name was, but the guy who was a recruit who decided to go to the G League instead of go to UCLA. So, like, their season was kind of up and down from the beginning. But, like, Mick Cronin is a phenomenal basketball coach.
Watched him many times in the Garden with Cincinnati.
Absolutely. He is a phenomenal basketball coach because he really, getting back to what we talked about coaching, he gets the best out of his players. And the guys, he doesn't generally have all these big-time superstars. If you go back to Cincinnati, they were grinders. They were good defensive players. He would find some guys that could be offensive, but they weren't like his days at Cincinnati. They weren't all these guys that are like, that is absolutely the most talented team. He got a different opportunity at UCLA. But you know what's interesting? Like, he had his own, I don't know that demons is the right word to get through, but like he had his own hurdle to overcome. He had never been – I don't think he had been to the Sweet 16. Right. He had all those times at Cincinnati, and they couldn't get beyond the second round either. And so not only did they do that with some upsets and then pull upsets along the way, I mean, they knocked off a 3 seed. They knocked off a 2. They knocked off a 1. They were right there with Gonzaga. I mean, it was phenomenal what UCLA did to get to the Final Four. And I think if assuming this stays the course, they're going to be preseason top 10 for sure. Probably preseason top 5 and an expectation to be in that 2-3 line again next year.
Well, the day after I called the ticket office and got a couple of tickets for my kids because it's walking distance and
wait a minute, was that your connection again, or was that more of the lines of like, well, we actually have to pay for these?
No. They're a paid ticket. Absolutely. But we're excited to head to Pauley to see the excitement. You know what? 2 years ago, I took my dad to Pauley for the first time. He's like, this isn't the Carrier Dome. What is going on out here?
Honestly, like that, it's crazy you say that. So like I can't remember like what we were talking about in 2005 when you were recalling that, but like my memory for sports stats and things along those lines are there, and they're like generally in chronological order. Like I could go backwards 2021 to like 1990 or whatever and tell you the Heisman Trophy winner, and probably have a slip up now here or there, but like, and the same thing holds true for NCAA tournaments and stuff like that. But like, if you look at some of the things that we thought of in high school or college about like, oh my God, UCLA, the win championships, this and that, and all the things, and then you finally get Pauley Pavilion is not as impressive as you think it is. Now it's been renovated and all that stuff, but it's not as loud. You know, there hasn't been as much attention paid. UCLA hasn't been the same. They're still waiting for the days of John Wooden. But nobody can live up to the days of John Wooden, right? Like that's never going to happen. But Mick Cronin has a new excitement, right? Again.
Absolutely. You feel it.
I think he'll capitalize on that. And by the way, you know, USC does too. And if USC football ever gets that back, he'll have that opportunity where they'll be there.
Absolutely.
You know, Chip Kelly. We'll see.
No, and I've been blessed to, you know, as you know, live down the street from the Carrier Dome with that type of big house, loud house environment, and you feel it. You feel the community. You feel the need to participate in something actually really greater than yourself. Yeah. So, Jason, we are honored, thrilled, and delighted that you were able to join us here on Rabbi on the Sidelines. Beyond your amazing voice and intellect and knowledge on the court, off the court, Westwood One, CBS Sports, Big Ten Network, Fox Sports. As we like to say, you're a mensch, an amazing human being, and we are excited to see the future. Jason Horowitz from Westwood One right here on Rabbi on the Sidelines. We'll see you next week.